everyone, I have Darren Mitchell here with me today. Welcome, Darren.
Hey Amy, nice to be here. It's been a little while.
It has. I'm putting you on the hot seat today, and we're going to dive into a little bit around your business journey and discovering a little bit around, where you're at, where you are now, and what you're most looking forward to in the future as well in the business. Because, like you said, you've been really busy working with some organizations and their sales teams at the moment. So, for
Sure.
those that might be listening to this who have just coming across you for the first time, Darren, can you give us a
Yep.
little bit of a spiel around who you are and who you help?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Well, as you can see on the screen there, my name's Darren Mitchell. Ex-corporate person, been in corporate for 20 plus years. Spent a lot of years holding what I call holding the bag of a salesperson. So I was in direct sales in the business to business space at two large Australian telecommunications organizations, and then had the privilege of being in a role where I was leading teams in the sales organization of both of those companies. I was Optus and Telstra. And in 2015, managed to exit from the corporate rat race, as I like to refer to it. And up until that time, I was doing some coaching and mentoring training,
Mhm.
and I felt that I'd like to add more value to sales leaders and sales teams in a more wider context. So hence I left the corporate world. Coming up, actually be June 15, 2025 will be the 10-year anniversary that I
Yeah.
left corporate, and it's been a wild ride. So what I
Yeah.
do now is work with sales organizations, sales teams, and certainly sales leaders, helping them become exceptional. So,
Mm.
and we can delve into what exceptional means, but more than better than average, let's just say.
Yeah, fantastic. And you have a podcast with the same name as well.
I do. Yes,
Yeah.
and you've been a wonderful guest on that, albeit 12 months ago now, and I have literally just finished recording episode 779 of that podcast. So a few more coming up this week. So it's not too long before we'll be hitting the 800 and hopefully eventually the 1,000 mark
That's
over the next little
huge.
while.
That's huge. Look, honestly, I think for a lot of people, whether they start a podcast or start a business, like just to be consistent with it for that period of time is an amazing achievement, in itself. So that's incredible. And coming up to the 10-year mark of your business is great too. So
Yeah.
rewind the clock for me, Darren, and tell me a little bit around like you'd had such a successful corporate career in the sales arena.
Mm.
What was it that made you go, okay, rather than going out to get another corporate job or taking a step that way, what was it that made you go, I actually want to start my own business in this field?
It's a great question. I loved the sales leadership role
Mm,
in insofar as the development of the people working hand in hand, arm in arm with the people and helping them develop and drive sales results.
mm,
What I didn't like as much was the internal stuff that often comes with a sales leadership role, such as the
mm,
regular cadence, the managing upwards, a lot of the politics and inverted commas that tends to happen in large corporate organizations.
yeah,
So it was a little bit of an evolution because in 2011, I was given the opportunity when I was at Telstra to be part of an executive leadership program, which
mhm,
was almost like they said at the top talent program.
yeah,
And part of that was getting access to an executive coach. And I
mhm,
really wasn't thinking about leaving the organization, but that experience over a period of 12 months really helped me crystallize what I was A, good at, and B, what I was really passionate about.
mm,
And from late 2011 into middle of 2012, that's when I really started to focus on, you know what, if I could add more value to more people, then I can
mm,
have a bigger impact.
yeah,
Because as a sales leader, I had responsibility for, say, 10 or 12 account managers. And
mhm,
whilst we had a lot of revenue under management and a lot of accounts to manage, my impact was really limited to those
mm,
10 or 12 people. And so I wanted to think, how can I have a wider reach and a deeper reach to people in corporate? Because I'm sure there are people out there that were experiencing and are experiencing the same challenges that I was experiencing. So through a number of, I guess, fortuitous opportunities, and I'm always conscious of the fact that often people are placed in your path. I got an opportunity to do a little bit of work with a company called Rogen SI, who are no longer around, but they were a global experiential training provider and facilitation company, and got on really well with their directors. And they asked me one day, just out of the blue, because we've been doing a bit of work with them at Telstra, helping our sales leaders become better coaches.
yeah,
And one of the directors rang me up and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about being an associate for us? We'd love to have you run some programs for us, all right?" So I'd
mm,
never even thought about that. So I said, "What's an associate?" And this is probably in late 2014, early
mhm,
2015.
mhm,
Anyway, I had a conversation with him and went through this initiation, and the initiation was literally me standing in front of a bunch of directors and a whole host of customer account managers that would look after big corporates from a training and facilitation point of view. And I had to give a 15 to 20 minute off the cuff facilitation session
Hmm.
because I wanted to see whether I was the type of person who they could be placed in front of their accounts as a
Yeah.
trainer, as a mentor, as a coach.
Yeah.
So I did that, and only it takes a week to find out how that went. He rang me
Hmm.
within 2 hours and said, "Mate, you're in." So that created a bit of a dilemma because I had a choice. I was still working full time.
Yes.
Was I going to work full time and do some of this on the side, or was this going to be jumping into this pretty much full time? So I spent about 2 months doing a little bit of both just
Hmm.
to test the
Hmm.
water.
Yeah.
And then in June 2015, that's when I pulled the trigger and said, you know what, it wasn't cold turkey. I'll go out and do this, see if I like it, see if I'm
Mm.
actually good at it. And within 3 months, it was, I'm thinking, why didn't I do this 4 or 5 years earlier?
Mm.
Because it just gave me access to a wider network of companies, a wider network of people, different cultures, but cultures that were hungry to learn and to improve.
Yeah.
And from there, I never really looked back because it was all about how do I have a wider impact and a deeper impact, not just within the confines of the organization. So
Yeah.
that's a long way of saying, Amy, I didn't want to go to another corporate
Yeah.
because it would have been probably repeating the same thing, and I could still have an
Mhm.
impact on a sales team,
Yes.
but now I could have a wider impact on many sales teams by doing what I do now.
Yeah, I love that because I think it was sort of a natural progression for you of like using your existing experience that you had, putting yourself in the way of opportunity as well. I think it's a big thing,
Yeah.
and just being good at your craft and then being able to go, okay, there's an opportunity in front of me. Now I've got a fork in the road, a choice to make. Which direction do I want to do? And
Yeah.
for many people, starting a business from scratch, it feels really risky, and there's all sorts of things to consider, from a financial point of view, from a lifestyle point of view, an impact point of view, all the things. So I love that you sort of, had that time where you had a few months to kind of dip your toes into it, go, yeah, I think this is the move, and then went all in from there. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and look, it's I'd love to say that it's been a wonderful transition and everything's been awesome since day one, but the reality is it's been up and down. It's peaks and troughs.
Yeah.
There are some months that are really, really super productive, and there are
Hmm.
other months where you think, oh my God, where's the next gig gonna come from?
Mm.
But it's just the journey, it's the experience. And I often talk to leaders and teams about the hero's journey and the fact that
Hmm.
all of us as individuals are on our own hero's journey, as are their companies on a hero's journey. And it's just embracing where you're at and thinking about,
Hmm.
okay, what can I now do? How can I put one step in front of the other? Who can I reach out to? Who can I add value to? Who can I give something to?
Yeah.
And knowing that if I do that over and over again, the law will be it'll come back, it'll be reciprocated. And
Yeah.
it does. It
Hmm.
does. And
Hmm.
it has. And
Yeah.
hopefully it continues, touch wood.
Absolutely. And I think there's, a lot of people get wrapped up in, especially in, we hear all these talks with entrepreneurship, and you probably come across this in your work with sales as well, where you're always looking for that next quick win. You're always looking for what's going to land today, what's going to happen today, when there's a long-term play about this as well. Any sort of sales leader that you're working with, I'm sure, has their pipeline that they have to develop for the long term and the short term.
Yeah.
It's similar in business, like you're saying, there's all these ebbs and flows and peaks and troughs, as you said. And so it's
Yeah.
looking at what's happening, this month, this week, but also what's happening in 6 months' time, 2 years' time, and do I want to be in the same spot now as I am, then as I am now, or what
Yeah.
can I do to change things as well?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
particularly in sales, because sales teams and sales people, and to some degree, sales leaders get
Mm.
measured month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year.
Yeah.
And depending on what the scoreboard says, that often in the eyes of others says whether you've been quote unquote successful or not.
Mm.
And so I mean, we've got to keep an eye on the what are the short-term results, but also
Mm.
start thinking about what's the long-term strategy for this team. And me as a sales leader, what am I here to do?
Mm.
The unfortunate thing is often sales leaders get burnt
Mm.
because they come into a role and they're often promoted because they've been a great salesperson.
Yes.
And so the business looks at them and says, Amy, you've been the number one salesperson or the number two salesperson. We're going to give you now a team to be responsible for,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not going to give you any training,
Yeah.
mate, because we just want you to replicate the results that you've been delivering
Been
with
getting,
your
yeah.
team.
Yeah.
And when that doesn't happen, there's no real support because often
Mm.
the senior leaders don't know how to support the sales leaders.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
the support that I provide because there is a transition plan that people have to follow because the skill set required to be a sales leader is in many cases completely different to the skill set required to be an effective salesperson.
Absolutely.
And not many organizations either get that, or if they do, they don't actually put any emphasis on how do I equip my sales leaders to drive sustainable success, not
Mhm.
just the short-term success.
Yeah,
And that's the work that I
absolutely.
do.
Yeah, and it's because it's a different context, and it's a different skill set, like you said, to make that transition. And just because you're great as an individual contributor doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to translate and have those leadership skills unless train for it and are coached on it and all sorts of
Yeah,
things as well. So
exactly.
that's awesome. And I think there's a lot of parallels in business too. I find with a lot of people that we work with who have had, brilliant corporate careers, like they've been executive level directors in different contexts in their corporate career. And then they go out to start their own business and they're like, hang on a minute, now I need to know how to sell. Now I need to know how to market myself, and I don't have a company brand behind me, and all of these sorts of things as well. So I'm interested for you because you're certainly not new to business now. Like if we fast forward into a few years of business, you got through the
Mm.
early hurdles and you had those opportunities in front of you. And I'm curious to know, like, what were some of the things that you found were some of the hurdles or the challenges that you overcame in those 10 years? Is there a couple that kind of stand out to you?
There is one of the things that one of the biggest, I guess, cultural shocks for me was the day after, a couple of days after I left Telstra, I had the mobile phone, but nobody was calling me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my phone was literally dead, and it wasn't dead because it was fully charged. There was just nobody calling, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'd come from an environment, Amy, where literally people would be calling me every day, and
Mm-hmm.
typically it's because they needed something, or they wanted something, or they needed help with something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
as soon as I wasn't there, they didn't call. So it actually, and I use this analogy a lot with sales leaders, particularly ones that are wanting to increase their, I guess, influence,
Yeah.
that you don't get paid or recognized because of who you are. You get paid or recognized because of the role that you fulfill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there was an example in the States of a gentleman who did a keynote address one year when he was a very senior executive, and he might have even been a government official in the US.
Mm.
He got first class air tickets, chauffeur limousine to an event, green room treatment, coffee or tea in a beautiful ceramic cup. And 12 months later, he came back, was invited to the same event, had to make his own way there, had to come
Mm-hmm.
in, get his own way to the green room, asked where there was coffee, and the person pointed over to the coffee cup, and he actually had his coffee in a styrofoam cup. And the message there for him, and this is what I've sort of had to grapple with as well, is that I only deserved the styrofoam cup. So all the accolades were based on the role that I fulfilled. It wasn't based on me.
Mm.
So it was a big cultural shift because when you're part of a big organization, you feel as if you're almost untouchable. Right? You can ring up and say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, I'm Darren from Telstra," and most people would open the door.
Yep.
When I'm ringing up and saying, "Hi, I'm Darren from my company's called Potential Unleashed," but if I say from the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast, they say, "Who? What?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So the credibility process has to start again.
Mm.
So I had to pretty much start from scratch, and we might touch a little bit on LinkedIn, but
Yeah.
I'd been pretty big on LinkedIn up until the end of my corporate career, but only
Mm-hmm.
as so far as I built a network within the telecommunications industry, right?
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
soon as I made the pivot away, I had to start thinking about, well, how do I now build a network of my ideal future customers, and
Mm-hmm.
how do I start connecting with them so that I can be more known, not so I can reach out and be salesy, but
Yeah.
just to say, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is the services I provide. If there's anything that you need, or if anybody you know, love to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the other thing, because
Yeah.
the doors that would open when you were part of a big company were not necessarily open to when you were just on your own. And so that
Absolutely.
that's probably the biggest culture shock.
Mm.
Now, it's taken time,
Yeah.
and this is why I say to people that you've got to play the long game.
Mm.
Don't expect instant results. And in a
Mm-hmm.
society where we have instant gratification being thrown at us every single moment of every single day,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually hard. It's actually hard to play the longer game because you
Yeah.
think, I need or I want to be able to provide these services. Don't people understand A,
Yes.
how good I am, and B, how passionate I am?
Yeah.
I know they don't, right? So
Mm.
I've had to play the patience game, but
Mm-hmm.
a game where I just continue to look to add value.
Mm.
And one thing that podcast has helped with that is just being more well known in the industry and
Yeah.
across just as not just Australia but across the world where people hear your voice, right? So I use it as a almost like an audio business card, where some
Hmm.
people use a book as a business card.
Yep.
It's almost like a credibility statement.
Hmm.
That certainly helped in terms of getting more well known in the industry, and certainly customers or potential customers are now kind of reaching out. So
Yeah.
it's been a long journey, but it's been a really interesting and fulfilling one.
Yeah, and I love that you said, you go from one context of being in your corporate career, and I love that story that you shared because it's so true. There's a whole repositioning that needs to happen, and what I find is that there's a lot of people that you might be connected to on LinkedIn that are from like your old context of
Yeah,
how you used to work, and they might not be as relevant to what you're trying to do moving forward. And
yeah,
so sometimes you go and you launch on LinkedIn, and you might have a few contacts but they're not the right kind of contacts that can open the next doors for you. And so
no,
it's about really intentionally starting to build your network with the right kinds of people as well. So,
yeah.
for you, the podcast has been a great way to do that. I'm curious as well, like what else has worked for you really well in terms of building your brand and playing that long game and really starting to get in the right kind of opportunities for you. And I'm going to bring up Vegas because this is something that was a really fun story that you shared with me. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, LinkedIn has certainly played a huge role in that. I am active on LinkedIn, but not as active as perhaps others could be, and I could certainly be more active on it. But being able to build a network of people who are in the, I guess, decision making realm or influencing realm around my ideal customer is something I'm continuing to focus on. I'm getting a lot of people now reaching out to me, which is great, and that's the ideal, situation where you've got people calling you or reaching out to say, "I
Mm,
love to connect. I'd love to know more about what you do." But it's just been consistent effort, being present, adding value, liking things, commenting on things,
mm,
putting out posts that are not designed to elicit any sales response, but are
mhm.
designed to add value. And through that consistent adding of value, people will keep you top of mind, which is all
Yeah.
about, because we understand that any sales organization, any buying organization, only around about 2 to 3% are in the buying window at any particular
Mhm.
time, which means
Mm,
that 97 to 98% are not. So
mhm.
we've got to have some sort of nurturing campaign to keep them aware of about who you are and what you do. But uh, I would put it down to, particularly the Vegas story, is put it down to persistence
Mm,
and just continuing to step up and to show up. And I'm not sure who said it, and I might be wrong to attribute this to him, but I think Coach John Wooden said 99% of success is just showing up
mm.
and sometimes being in the right place at the right time, but you have to have been prepared.
Yeah.
So the way Vegas came about, and big shout out to, some people I was working with over there. I actually had a gentleman come onto my podcast back in August, and we had a fantastic conversation around sales leadership.
Mm,
And I'll give him a shout out. His name's Alan Verstegen. He's one of the founders of a company called Growth Matters International,
mhm.
and they specialize in sales leadership training, coaching, facilitation, working with sales leaders around the world because they've realized that a lot of salespeople get a lot of training, but not a lot
Mhm.
of sales managers, and
Yeah.
that's the big impact. And I just got talking after the podcast. We had a great conversation, and he said, "Mate, I love coming to Australia, and I'm coming over there again in October." And I said, "Mate, if you ever need a chop out, because we're both on the same page, we just got on like a house on fire." And I said, "I'd love to have a chat and see how I can help." And he said, "Oh, well, come up to Sydney in October, running a 2 day for a company called Adobe, global organization." And then he said in the next breath, "What are you doing in December?" I said, "Well, leading up to Christmas, not much. It's pretty quiet." He said, "How would you like to come to Vegas and be part of the facilitation team? Because we're putting a team together for the Adobe Sales Leadership, Global Sales Leadership Sales Kickoff." Anyway, one thing led to another, and then a week in Vegas before Christmas, and we're on stage dealing with probably 700 Adobe sales leaders from around the world, helping them with their kickoff. Yeah, and there's more work coming. So it was a great experience. But the point of that is that would never have happened had I not have continued to step up. Because here's the thing I've found, and this is a lesson for sales leaders and salespeople, is that you just keep knocking on doors, right? Know what you stand for, know what your values are, and know how to continue to give value. If you remain persistent and top of mind, eventually, when the buying signals are there, when the people are ready to do something, they're going to think of you first.
Yeah.
And so if I hadn't have kept doing that, because that was probably after about, I don't know, 670 episodes or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that opportunity would never have come had I not done all the previous ones. So
Absolutely.
it's very easy to look at and say, "Well, you got lucky," but no, it's all the work that I did leading up to that that got me in a position where that presented an opportunity, and I was ready because I'd been prepared for it.
Absolutely love that. And I think there's so many people that, give up after the second or the third attempt at something, whether it be posting on LinkedIn or doing a podcast episode, and they will do it two or three times. And then if they don't get an immediate return on it in terms of what they expect or dollars in the bank or engagement or whatever success they're looking for,
Yeah,
they go, oh, this doesn't work for me.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
they put it to the side and they give it up. Whereas
yes,
yourself and plenty of other people out there are proof that it does work. It's just that they haven't done enough reps
that's it.
for it to work. And so, I think there's an element sometimes, particularly for a lot of independent coaches and consultants out there, that we kind of, you want your work to speak for itself, and you want people just to come and find you when they're ready, or people in your network to give you a little tap on the shoulder or for the phone to ring in your context as well from the
Mm,
beginning. And the reality is that it just doesn't happen that way anymore. You have to be on the front foot. You have to be front of mind. You have to be positioned in the right way and prepared, like you were saying, to actually be in front of the queue for those opportunities.
totally. And when those opportunities do present themselves, you've got to know how to take advantage of those and
Hmm.
not become the super slick salesy person that has commission breath where you now scare those people away.
That's it.
So as an example, I mean, there's been two corporate gigs I've done in the last couple of months where
Hmm.
both of those have come from connections that have been on LinkedIn
Hmm.
that, and I know you talk about this concept of LinkedIn lurker all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I had, and it didn't come directly from them. It came from a connection at the company where these two people worked.
Mm.
But they reached out to me because they'd been following me on LinkedIn. They'd heard a few podcasts, and there was one particular podcast episode, an article that I wrote that really resonated for both of them,
Yeah.
which then led them to say, "Hey, would you be open to do a day or 2 days worth of training for our sales team and our sales leaders on this topic?"
Hmm.
Now, because I'd been doing that, and I didn't know that they'd been watching because they hadn't commented, they hadn't sent me any messages. And I look back at the history, I'd been connected with these people for like 6, 7 years. And this year, they then reached out and managed. I met. We obviously did some work together. But again, I didn't know they were watching, and that's the thing. You just don't know. So, as a business person,
Mm.
every day it's got to be an opportunity. How do I put a message out? How do I continue to give? Because I'm giving a value, not giving because I want something in return, but giving because it's the right thing to do. And I say this to leaders all the time. Give because it's going to help somebody either improve a skill set, improve an
Hmm.
attitude, drive a competency. Don't give because you're expecting something in return. Now, the more you do that, guess what? People are going to unconsciously give you or seek to give you an opportunity to
Hmm.
reciprocate when they can. Now, it might be directly through that person,
Hmm.
or in these cases, it could be through other people, but because there's been a trust transfer, they almost come through as like a warm lead,
Hmm.
and we end up doing business together. And it's just,
Yeah.
it happens.
It does, definitely. And I think, we're really aligned in our approach there and around, you hear us say this in the tribe all the time where we say, don't pitch slap people. It's not about, like you, in your words, a commission breath that you can absolutely sense it from a mile away. And I think it's aligned with a lot of people where they're worried about coming across as too salesy or not sure how to have that right approach. And
Yeah.
like you're saying, if you're able to lead and like create genuine relationships with people and lead with value
Mm.
first, and you have the right message at the right time, for those people, that's when things start to really snowball. And that's when things really start to expand in the business as well. And so I'd love to hear like from you. Obviously, we've been working together for a little while, Darren, around some of these things and getting you out there on LinkedIn in different ways. And so I wonder for you, was there sort of one or two key things that really helped to accelerate things for you in terms of what you're experiencing on the platform?
So one of the big things, and it might sound like a bit of a cliche, Amy, and I
Mm.
apologize if it does, but success is not a like a single person game.
Yeah.
And I've heard things like success is not an island, you're not an island, and it takes a village to raise a child, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot in that as a business person, one of the things that that I realized is leaving corporate, you had a lot of people around you,
Hmm. Hmm.
but the question was, were those people around you for what they could get from you, or were they around you for what they could add to you?
Mm.
And what I've found with programs like the Aligned Tribe is that people have their own challenges. They're at their own stage of development from a business point of view,
Hmm.
but they're all there to give as much value and support as they possibly can to others. So there's no ulterior motive.
Yeah.
So when I was in corporate, there was almost like the back of the mind, there was like, okay, this person's ringing me. What are they ringing for? What's the
Mm.
agenda here?
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
no agenda. So one of the biggest things is to have a support network around you and be very careful as to who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the biggest things in relation to what the tribe does provide because it's literally a tribe, right? People are on the same journey, albeit maybe at different stages, but they all have a common objective that is to help and further develop capabilities within the business, help grow the business and add value to the industries that you're working in.
Yeah.
But then the structure that comes behind that as well. Because
Hmm.
one of the things that, even though I was pretty big on LinkedIn and had started to build a really reasonable following,
Mm.
putting in the structure in terms of how to put some meaningful content out there,
Yeah.
having almost like a calendar of, what should I be doing on what dates,
Mm. Mm.
having somebody that you could rely upon to ask some questions or to sit in a hot seat and get interrogated by certain things, right? Really helpful because it
Yeah.
means that if we're going off path,
Hmm.
then we want to be able to get back on track as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So if you think about the analogy of the plane taking off, in any travel they're going,
Mm.
most of the time they're off track.
Hmm.
They've got to recorrect, eventually to get to the destination. I think that's probably the biggest thing that Tribe does provide you because you've got people who help you recorrect, help you get back on track, remind you, and maybe even identify some blind spots that perhaps
Mm.
you didn't know you had when you're just get your head down, your bum up, trying to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And the accountability there is probably the biggest one as well. It's the networking, it's the fact that you can ask questions,
Hmm.
it's the fact that you can look at different ways of doing things and you
Hmm.
think, wow, that I've never thought about that. That's a really interesting insight. Let me implement that and let me tweak it a little bit and implement it. It's been outstanding.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, like you said, just having that different perspective and those different insights. I know when you're, like you said, in your own business, you feel pretty isolated sometimes, when you just head down doing the work and everything feels urgent and everything is on you and everything lands in with you. So it's kind of nice to go, okay, should I be heading down this path or this path? Like, where's the best use of my time right now for the stage of business that I'm at and also
Yeah.
where I'm wanting to get to as well? Because, implementing the right strategy, but at the wrong time of your
Mm.
business is not going to work either. So you need to have that nuance of different perspective of people that have been there and done it as well.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean, I mean, I've learned from people who have been in business a lot less time than I
Mm.
have, and it's inspirational, right? And sometimes you can fall into the traps of playing the comparison game, and I have this issue a lot with corporates who are trying to, increase their career or get a promotion or
Yeah.
never compare yourself with somebody else, but
Mm.
look at what that person is doing and
Mm.
what's the strategy they're utilizing and what are they getting in terms of result and how can I elicit that strategy to implement into what I do. It's actually quite inspirational because you've got people who have been relatively short in terms of
Mm.
in business that
Yeah.
hey they've got perspectives that perhaps you'd never thought of.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's the other good thing is that you've got people from different walks of life and different business areas, different
Hmm.
specialties
Mm.
that just because you're in a different discipline doesn't mean you can't learn something from them
Yeah.
because they don't have the filter that perhaps we have being in corporate. They're
Mm.
like, wow, why don't you do this? Okay, cool. I've never thought about that. Go and implement it.
Yeah. Yeah, for
So
sure.
being open, being curious, and being humble but also being accountable is a big thing
Mm.
as well.
Yeah, I love that because we don't have a boss anymore. So it's just about, you've always been in that sales environment where the numbers don't lie and you're tracking, towards your numbers. And it's the same in business, but often when it's something that we do by ourselves, it's nice to have that
Yeah,
external kind of accountability, like you were
yeah,
saying as well, just to keep growing.
yeah.
And
Totally.
talking about growth, Darren, what's on the agenda for you in the coming years? Tell me about the big vision for the business and you're getting people reaching out to you with LinkedIn, you're busy beyond busy. I know with the projects and training that you've got coming up, but talk to me about, the next couple of years in the business. What are you focused on? What's the big vision?
The podcast will continue. I have no inclination of stopping that.
Yeah.
Would like to do a lot more group work
Hmm.
and less one-on-one stuff. And
Hmm.
I think that's where the real, I guess, duplication leverage
Hmm.
happens.
Mm.
Doing a lot more global work, and that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean me traveling globally, although
Mhm.
there might be some of that which I'm very open to.
Yeah.
But certainly
That's
doing a
great
lot more
news.
global work with organizations and potentially getting to the stage where I'll need to have other trainers coming on and other coaches coming on
Mm.
to
Mm.
help, I guess, facilitate and deliver that message in under the guise of the exceptional sales leader. So that's a longer
Mm.
term thing. I have no inclination of employing people.
Yeah.
I don't want that hassle, but certainly expanding and continuing to add value in a wider sense
Hmm.
would be
Hmm.
great. And maybe in the process, maybe stepping back a little bit and
Yeah.
having a bit of a rest.
Having a life and a business at the same time, Darren, is the goal.
Well, you know what? And you talk about this all the time, and it's sometimes it's been challenging because I'm not sure whether you felt this when you were in corporate, but you make that transition and you're still almost thinking corporate. So I've got to be working between these hours and I've got to be doing this and I can't take a day off because if I take a day off, there's a revenue day that I don't get.
Hmm.
So it's just adjusting that mindset. But a lot of that then comes down to, well, how much do you value your time
Hmm.
and how do you place a value on the services that you provide and therefore how do you charge and how do you create an investment that is commensurate with, I guess, the experience and what you provide in terms of value. So
Yeah.
that continues to be a work in progress, right? So,
Absolutely. We
and I've
could
been
spend
at this
another
for 10
hour
years.
talking about that exact topic, Darren, because I remember the first week in my business and it was, Thursday afternoon and I'd kind of got through my to-do list for that day and it was about 3:30 in the afternoon. And in my head, I'm sitting there going, okay, what can I do to fill up this next hour and a half to get me to 5 o'clock? Because that was finished work time, and it had been for so many years. So I'm like,
Yeah.
if I was in my corporate environment, like you'd be at your desk and you'd be thinking, okay, what else can I do to get ahead for the next day or what needs to happen? Realistically, I could have just closed my laptop at 3:30, gone had a nice cup of coffee and enjoyed the rest of the sunshine for the day. Like I
Yeah.
could have done that, but you were still in that mindset of like filling up your time with sometimes really busy work, but
Mm,
maybe not as productive work. So I think there's a whole bunch of things in that, but definitely have had that experience as well, where you need to unlearn a lot of the things that were just so natural and normal for so long.
absolutely. And I talk to sales leaders all the time about that concept in terms of where are you going to get the best return on
Mm.
your effort
Hmm.
and your
Hmm.
focus. And if they sat down and they worked out what their hourly, not their hourly rate, but what they're worth on an hourly basis when all
Yeah.
things are considered in terms of the value they drive for the organization, and
Hmm.
then place almost like this huge value on the time.
Hmm.
And it might sometimes sound counterintuitive that you want to give your time to your team because you want to be there to serve your team, but also on the counter of that, you want to make it harder for your team to get access to you because you're not there to be the codependent sales leader. You want to be helping them to be more independent in terms of their
Hmm.
thinking
Hmm.
and help them develop resourcefulness,
Yeah.
which means you've got to think about, well, where do you spend your time? When's the best time for you to add value? When's the best time for you to take some recuperation to go and walk in the sunshine and turn the phone off? I'm still working on that.
Oh, good. Well, look, honestly, I love supporting you in the business, and I love seeing your progress and the value that you bring. And it is so true that you're making a huge impact. So, what you set out to do at the beginning of your business journey, you're definitely doing that, which is awesome. And there's so much more potential for you to reach, as you said, as you start to expand and bring on other people into the team as well. It's super exciting. So, Darren, where can people go to find you if they want to connect with you further and talk a little bit more about the work you're doing?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Obviously, LinkedIn is the number one spot. Just either search my name, Darren Mitchell, or search for sales leadership coach as
Mhm.
a search function. That'll bring my LinkedIn profile up. In there is also my website, exceptionalsalesleader.com, and my podcast is the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast, which is on all reputable podcasting platforms and probably also some not so reputable platforms. So
If you dig back into the archives, you'll probably find our episode in there as well.
it will be there. It's definitely there. I just can't remember what number it was, but it's definitely there.
That's all right. It's there. It did happen.
It did. Absolutely, it did. It was a ripping
Brilliant.
episode.
Well, Darren, thank you so much for spending your time talking a little bit around the insights. And I know that, for many people here that are listening to this, they can probably relate to a lot of the things you spoke to, whether it be from a sales point of view or from your own journey in business as well. Just a last little thought to leave us with. If there was someone that was considering working with us in the tribe and they were kind of on the fence, what would be your advice to them?
And this is not a paid advertisement by any stretch of the imagination,
It
Amy,
is
but
not.
as we talked before, success is not a singular thing. So you need a support team around you. So if you're looking for some support, if you're looking for some encouragement, if you're looking for people to keep you accountable, then a mastermind or a tribe environment is the perfect, I guess, environment to do that.
Mm.
Are people going to do the work for you? No. Are people going to ask you questions? Yes. Are they going to potentially hold the feet to the fire? Absolutely. But it's done with love and it's done with ethics. So if people are thinking, I'm not quite sure about this thing, is it an investment in yourself? Yes, it is. But it's more importantly an investment in your future self and your future direction, but also the clients you're going to work with. So if people are sitting on the fence, then what's stopping you? Jump in because there are people who are going to be rooting for you and challenging you, but you'll probably look back and say, why didn't I do this earlier? That's what I'd be saying.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Darren. Appreciate your time.
Oh, good. Thanks, Amy.